Welcome back. SilverDFanng with more YouTube reactions. I'm going to butcher this name. Suibhne. It's a history channel. And we watched Boarderlands, the history of Ukraine. Really cool, very in-depth. I learned a lot. I also forgot a lot. Enjoy.
The Samurai Limited.
This feels like I can't get away from the Ukraine for the last 8 years. No, I don't. I feel bad. I know very little about the Ukraine culture except for the war, and that sucks, and they don't deserve that. So, Suibhne, Boarderlands, the animated history of Ukraine.
The edition pin is available now. Hurry and order yours now before they run out.
That's
or get one
pin.
for free by signing up at Patreon like all of these nice people.
That's a
This
cute
episode
pin.
is supported by Raycon, a wireless earbud company co-founded by Ray J and many other titans of the music industry at about half the price of the leading premium brands. Head to buyraycon.com/SUIBHNE to get a further 15% off your order, which will also help support this channel.
So, if it's under a year, I'm playing the advertisements because they are still making money off of them, and we are using their video to react to, so they should get something out of it. If it's over a year, they're not getting anything from Raycon anymore, so that we're watching the ad.
Ukrainian identity long precedes the formation of any nation-state on this soil. The modern geopolitical entity and the current Ukrainian crisis can all trace their roots back to the land's unique geography and some of Europe's most fascinating cultures. An identity that has its foundations in no less than 3 geographic features.
Okay.
The Eurasian steppes, the Dnieper River, and of course, the Black Sea. These 3 very important parts of Ukraine not only shape its culture and identity, but have also made Ukraine a pawn in the strategic and economic games of larger powers, especially between Russia and the West. During the centuries of Russian hegemony, this was less of a problem. Monarchs and autocrats don't really care much for identity politics after all. But post-independence, the centuries of influence from outside powers have started to show. But Ukraine has its own nationhood and a story that goes all the way back to the migration of nomads through the Pontic-Caspian steppe.
Okay. Oh shit! Oh shit! Oh shit! Rice farming!
Well, it's been a long time coming, the remake of my old Ukraine video. Let's see if I can get it right this time. Now I know what you're thinking. Doesn't Ukraine's history begin with the Slavic migrations? And the answer is kind of yes, but then...
Okay, I'm just gonna say it right now. Slavs, I like your fit. I like the tunic, I like the buttons, I love your goofy hat, I love it all. 10 out of 10 fashion.
Nomadic cultures of the Eurasian steppes are inseparable from Ukraine's early development. A steppe, in geographic terms, if you're not aware, lends itself almost exclusively to the development of nomadic societies.
Also, fuck you, America. I'm on neither side. Fuck both of you.
They lack geographic boundaries for defense, materials for building, and the grazing patterns of animals mean that, well, you go where the food goes.
Makes sense.
This is one of the reasons why the horse was domesticated in the steppes. It made travel and hunting easier, and facilitated the raiding of rival tribes. And if a horde got big enough, it might start raiding, say, the crumbling Roman Empire. Hordes of Alans, Huns, Avars, Bulgars, and Khazars had passed through this area on their way to the rich lands of Rome, and each had left a massive influence on the Slavs and directly caused their migrations in the first place. If you think about it, the only place being worse than Rome would have been like anything on the way to Rome. Next is our second geographic feature, the Dnieper River, which means we get to talk about Vikings. Now, the lands of the Slavs you see were pretty irresistible to the Swedish Vikings. No centralized control, tons of wealth to raid and trade for, and hundreds of miles of long navigable rivers through it all, at the end of which lies the jackpot itself, Constantinople. It wasn't long before these Norsemen, who the Slavs called Rus, had built a huge trade empire centered on the Dnieper River, an old Khazar trading post called Kiev. Now, of course, the Slavs did eventually
This is starting to feel a lot like Canada. Not going to go in full detail, but Canada, the reason why Canada developed the way it did was also because of other countries' want for wealth. Like, we started small ports on the East Coast, and then they realized the resources of the middle, and then they found out about the forests and the oil and the minerals and the gold on the west, and then England, France, a little bit of America, a little bit of Spain got involved. And that's how we got Western Canada. I'm not even kidding. British Columbia was literally just a port town for Hudson Bay Company for a long ass time.
expel the Vikings from their land, but then quite ironically politely asked them to return and rule them, which began the medieval state known as the Kievan Rus. To try and create some unity through religion, Prince Vladimir the Great sent envoys to all the neighboring lands to study
sorry, I missed this. Kai said OpenAI, NVIDIA, Micron are Captain Planet villains. I agree. Trying to figure out how to work my NVIDIA is fucking insane.
various faiths, who reported that the Jews had lost Israel and therefore couldn't possibly be a blessed people. The Muslim Bulgars were sad and stinky, their words, not mine, and also prohibited drinking, to which old Vlad here laughed, saying drinking is the joy of the Rus, before finally settling on Christianity. To be specific, Eastern Orthodox Christianity, ostensibly because of how impressed his envoys were with the Hagia Sophia, but between you and me, I think they were just trying to suck it up to the Byzantines. His son, who had become known as Yaroslav the Wise, greatly expanded the prosperity of the Rus state with Ukraine's oldest body of codified laws. Although the Rus were pretty prosperous, they soon fragmented into regional rival city-states for two main reasons. One was the arrival of the Cumans, who took control of Crimea and severely handicapped their trade routes, and two was the decline of its most wealthy ally, Constantinople, thanks to a little event called the Fourth Crusade. You really can trace a lot of Europe's history to this event, huh?
You can cause good or bad a lot of Europe's sad destruction, or not sad destruction, but some of its worst moments and its most depraved to the Crusades and the Catholic Church.
Due to increased infighting, the Rus cities were at their weakest point in decades, and so probably wouldn't deal very well with, say, a horde of more than 30,000 mounted archers from Mongolia.
Oh, that feels very precise.
Ooh, just their rotten luck. The part I want to focus on here during an era called the Mongol-Tatar yoke is not so much the rapid rise of the Golden Horde, which made the Rus its glorified cash cow through extortion, but rather its inevitable and arguably more important collapse. Because in what was the medieval Rus state, three regional powers would come to fill the Mongol vacuum, forever driving a wedge between the northeast and the southwest. Moscow would consolidate in the north, becoming the genesis of the Russian state, but for Ukraine,
send me a video.
That genesis was in Lithuania. It's hard to conceptualize this today, but the Lithuanian state once stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea, later forming a union with Poland, absorbing swathes of those.
That's insane, because today, how many of us actually know where Lithuania is on a map? I'm going to tell you right now, none of us.
Old Mongol Rus lands, which in Latin they called Ruthenia. This was the turning point for the lands of the Rus controlled by the West, diverging from those controlled by Moscow. Through the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, what would become Ukraine had a direct line to Western philosophy and liturgy, with the Greek Catholic, or Uniate Church, flourishing in this period, whereas Moscow was isolated and inherited its autocratic rule from the Mongols. Even more so, symbolically, Moscow saw itself as the Third Rome, the defender of the Orthodox faith, which further alienated it from the West. Then we have our third regional power, the Crimean Khanate, a rump state of the Mongol-influenced Cumans, whom the Slavs simply called Tatars. And here we get to talk about one of the most fascinating aspects of Ukrainian history. With the introduction of serfdom, a more severe form of feudalism, thousands of peasants fled to the vast, open, sparsely populated frontiers to escape subjugation. Embracing their nomadic roots, living off the land free and fairly, they constructed a whole society with refugees, peasants, escaped serfs and slaves, Tatars, Ruthenians, Catholics, Orthodox, and Muslims alike. They would become perhaps the most important piece of Ukraine's identity: the Cossacks.
I know that word.
It's hard for me to overstate just how powerful the Cossacks became. Not only were they instrumental in leveraging their autonomy and powerful armies in service of the Polish crown, but they became inseparable from the idea of self-determination. The roots of Ukrainian ideas of independence were the Cossacks. And if they weren't treated the way they wanted to be, as equal autonomous partners, then they would be more than happy to fight on behalf of someone else. An opportunity they soon took during the Second Northern War. The Northern Wars were a long series of not altogether related events, but basically amounted to these four powers butting heads for more territory.
Okay, we got the Swedes, we got the Russians, we got Poland, Lithuania with their awesome winged armor, and we got the Tatars. Got it.
Especially over the Baltic Sea. But the part we're going to focus on is the Khmelnytsky uprising, and for this we have Joe from the channel Jabzy.
Although the Cossacks had formed a close bond with the Commonwealth and had participated in numerous wars against the Turks
cool
and Tatars,
armor.
the spirit of independence within their homeland, the Zaporozhian Siege, lived on. Tensions had reached a boiling point when King of Poland, John Casimir II...
Oh, no, it's okay, Blue. Poland's not being invaded. Poland is the invader.
ZZZZ.
treated the siege with contempt and made efforts to curtail their autonomy, spurred by
That
many
man's
local
got nice
Cossack
hair.
uprisings. When wars broke out between the empires of Russia, Sweden and Poland-Lithuania, the Cossacks took the opportunity to assert their independence and revolted under the leadership of Hetman Bogdan Khmelnytsky, aligning themselves with Moscow. To
That's
this
a
day,
nice
it is still
mustache.
unclear whether the treaty between the Tsar and the Cossacks aimed for further integration within the Russian Empire, or simply as a temporary military cooperation. But the Russian Empire's growth in the 18th century would ensure that Russia's interests would soon dominate. However, right-bank Ukraine still remained loyal to the Commonwealth, and when the left-bank Cossacks invaded Poland...
Hey, look, it's red and green. It's Christmas. Oh, see, even war is festive. Happy holidays, everyone. Except if you're in 14th century Poland, Lithuania, Russia, Ukraine, or you're a Tata.
On the side of Russia, it set off a series of brutal atrocities remembered in Poland as the Deluge, and in right-bank Ukraine it is known as the Ruin. This pivotal event would not only weaken the Commonwealth as a regional power, but also result in the creation of a Cossack hetmanate within the ironically far more
That's a nice
heavy-handed rule
horse.
of the Russian Tsars. And if you'd like to learn more about this period, come check out my video on the Khmelnytsky uprising over on my channel Jabzy.
Now, basically from the onset of the uprising, the Cossacks were treated with a certain degree of suspicion by the Russians. They were all too happy to use them to defend against Tatar raids and even to aid them in their conquest of Siberia, but the Tsars knew all too well that a Cossack revolt could spell absolute disaster if they ever lost the hetmanate's favor. All the Cossacks wanted was independence, and Russia simply couldn't allow that to happen. Their fears were pretty well founded, as it turns out.
Call them Cossacks, call them nomads, call them Ukrainians. Doesn't matter. Russia doesn't want them to be independent. Sad. Also, 1 second. Tov! Tov, I'm down here, baby. Come on. You might not hear her, but Tov is just meowing sadness upstairs. And it's very sad.
Since the Cossacks again switched sides in support of Sweden during the Great Northern War, but this time at the disastrous Battle of Poltava. The Cossack host was defeated, and from this point on, the seeds of malicious distrust in Ukraine had been
Blue, what are you talking about? They already did invade Ukraine. Twice!
sown. Russian control over the Cossacks, and Ruthenians in general, would slowly increase over time, accelerated by the partitions of Poland, where all of Ukraine, save for Galicia, found its...
I hate to tell you this, Blue. Call it Ukraine, call it Poland, call it Hungary, Bulgaria. It's not going to cause World War III, because none of those countries are super connected to the Western superpowers or China. It's just the sad truth of what we live in.
itself under Russian rule. There was of course an added benefit to increased control over the Ruthenians, and that was because they stood between them and something the Russians deeply coveted: the Black Sea. From the 15th century onward, it was clear to the Russians that the only way to truly become a world power like those of Western Europe was through a large, powerful navy, but they lacked much in the way of seaports. This was one of the motivations behind the Northern Wars, after all, gaining control of the Baltic Sea. And it wasn't long before Russia started eyeing the Black Sea as well, inconveniently controlled by the Ottomans and the Tatars. One Russo-Turkish war later, Crimea was now easy pickings and annexed in 1783, just in case you thought Russia annexing Crimea was a new phenomenon. As with most of the territories acquired by the Russian Empire, Ukraine was heavily suppressed. Its Cossack hosts lost more and more of their autonomy, the Ruthenian language we now call Ukrainian was banned, and rebellions were violently put down. This was all part of a process known as Russification, and one of its largest proponents was Catherine the Great. Jews were especially affected by these policies, restricted to stay in an area known as the Pale, in small, economically disadvantaged communities called the shtetl, which greatly contributed to the suppression of Jewish culture. Now, although 19th century Russia was succeeding in the spreading of its internal power, the same cannot be said for its place on the world stage, and their intellectual control over Ruthenia would weaken due to several reasons. Firstly was the spreading of the Enlightenment ideas of self-determination during the French Revolution. Secondly, the revolutions of 1848. And thirdly,
People don't realize how important the American Revolution was. Not just because the US, but because it showed that the
Incoming
furthest,
ad break.
most dirtiest, the most forgotten colony of England can take them down and can do something new for the people. Any country can do that. So the French Revolution started and really showed that that the nobility is a outdated thing, and it really started to spread revolutionary concepts over Europe, and it kind of is the beginning of the end of monarchies and kingdoms.
the very overt demonstration that Russia was not the invincible power it fancied itself, losing major world conflicts in the disastrous campaigns of the Crimean War and the Russo-Japanese War, had exposed a weakness in the Tsarist regime that had stubbornly lacked reform and industrialization on the scale of other nations. It's not surprising then to see that Ukraine was at the ready to go its own way during the worst conflict Europe was to know at the time,
World War I?
the outbreak of the First World War, the effects of which would lead to the Russian Civil War. It's worthwhile to remember that the Russian Civil War was by no means a monolith. It was a complicated network of ever-changing alliances, and this is no more evident than in Ukraine, where it is remembered as the Ukrainian War for Independence, an independence they ultimately did not achieve. The anti-Bolshevik White Army allied with some of the Ukrainian nationalists, who in turn had allied with the Second Polish Republic. The Black Army had initially seized swathes of territory to form an anarcho-socialist society before eventually allying with the Bolshevik Reds, and the Bolsheviks even used Ukraine as a bargaining chip to seal a peace with Germany in 1918, but also with Poland in 1921, which is where the borders were ultimately settled on again, splitting Ukraine in two. It was not until the Second World War that West Ukraine would be reunited, by force. I've covered the history of the Soviet Union in a separate video, so I won't go into too much detail about this era here, but I do want to go over some important details in Ukraine's more contemporary development. The first was that of exploitation. Ukraine became a massive center of industrialization and natural resources in the Soviet era, making it a huge target for two of humanity's worst dictators. Not only Hitler during the invasion of the Soviet Union, but also the Soviets' own premier, Joseph Stalin, whose
Yeah, this is something that there's a lot of shit that Western history classes like to just go quickly over when it comes to World War II.
I'm Toff.
They love to talk about how it was unified against Germany and this evil, evil man. What they forget was it wasn't actually that unified. They probably could have taken down the Axis of Powers a lot sooner and a lot cleaner, but they England, France, America were worried about Russia getting more power. And Russia was absolutely trying to take advantage of Germany's, like, the axis of power, Germany, Italy, and Japan's conflict, and they absolutely were trying to take more land. And yeah, Ukraine was definitely used as just fodder. Like a lot of these, Poland, everyone knows about Poland, Germany invading Poland, Ukraine was used against Russia, Hungary, Bulgaria, they're all fucked. But it never gets said, because World War II is like the last time that the US is seen as the pure good guys in a war, but even then, not really.
Land reforms would cause the Great Soviet Famine, known as the Holodomor, which led to the deaths of between 3...
I agree with you. Everyone stop trying to kill people for land that you don't own. Landlords, fuck off. Fuck off, landlords.
and 12 million Ukrainian peasants. A majority of the more than 2 million Soviet Jews who perished in the Holocaust were also from Ukraine, which erased almost all of its historical Jewish community. In Kiev alone, the SS killed more than 30,000 Jews in just 2 days during the infamous Babin Yar massacre. The second is more to do with Ukraine's current geopolitical standpoint, which I think is vital to understanding post-independence Ukraine, which has been in a push and pull in 2 directions directly linked to its unique geography. The vast open steppes are still envied by the Kremlin, who has lost one of its great buffer zones to NATO. Pro-Western leadership in this young nation has been hamstrung by Russian influence on more than one occasion. Russia wants Ukraine to be a quiet and stable ally, and they've actively supported pro-Russian separatists since 2014. The Dnieper River still forms the nucleus of the nation, and a divide that has gone back centuries by influences from outside powers. The inhabitants on the east of this river are still more likely to identify as and to speak Russian, thanks to centuries of oppression under the Tsars and the Soviet Union. And of course, the Black Sea is still as hotly contested as ever. Fearing Ukraine moving to closer ties with the European Union and the rampant instability of the Ukrainian crisis, Russia illegally annexed the Crimean Peninsula to protect its Black Sea ports. The current Ukrainian crisis may feel new, but it's worth remembering that we're not at the end of Ukraine's story, nor are we ever. We're in the middle of its most recent chapter, and conceptualizing its past may help with its future going forward.
It's also not new for other countries to use Ukraine's bullshit situation for their own advantages. I'm just shaking my head.
Thank you to today's sponsor, Raycon. Sorry, no clever segues this time. All I want to let you know is that I hate buying earbuds. They're always way too expensive these days, and audiophiles talk endlessly with words I don't understand, and at the end of the day, they're probably going to get lost or eaten by my dog anyway. So, Raycon is the perfect solution to...
That's a cute dog. Yeah, poor Ukraine. Let Ukraine just be a fucking country. Stop using them as, like, propaganda fuel to hate Russia. Stop using them as a foothold. Just let them be their own fucking thing. Hey, thanks for checking out this video. Check me out on Twitch, SilverDFanng, 2 N's in Fang. Check me out on Twitter and Blue Sky under the same name. Also TikTok. Have a great night.